right, let's go ahead and get going for the class then for Fusion 360 Basics. Today we are going to be covering just some of the background of the application itself and 3D modeling, how to set up an account so that way you can get it started for free, and of course how to create a coffee cup using Fusion 360. So let's just go ahead and get started with it. So I already have Fusion 360 downloaded on this computer. So right now I am going to just get started setting up an account from scratch. So you start off, oops, creating a new account. Go ahead and fill in your name, email, and select a password. Agree to the terms and conditions and create an account. Now, one thing that's notable when you create your account is it will require verification right away. I should have my email right up here, and if you don't have the email, go ahead and refresh your inbox, and then so sign into whatever email account you have. I'm using Gmail here. Open the email that Autodesk sends you and just click to verify, and then it is going to have you sign in using the email and password that you just used. And then you can choose to leave the box checked if you want to get emails from Autodesk. If you don't, you can uncheck the box. And from there you have your Autodesk account set up. So now you should be able to go into Fusion and now just sign in using your regular screen. So it's going to ask you to create a team. If you're going to be using this with other folks, you can join a team, but for most individual users, it's just going to have you create your own team name, and that can be whatever you like. Just click through the menus to keep it going. There we go. And now you can also go through for the subscription, you can choose to pay for a subscription. Otherwise, there are options that you can select to do just a free trial. For right now, we're just going to run with the 30-day free trial that this comes with. All right. Make this a little bit bigger here. So here we have our workspace in Fusion 360. So now that we are logged in and ready to go, let me just pull up our guide here. So I do have a step-by-step guide in Google Docs that you can link to um, in the chat, and Ruth, who's moderating, is able to link that too. If you just type exclamation point Fusion 360, then this guide is going to pop up, or a link to it. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. We've got some useful keyboard shortcuts. We're just going to be going through menus today to find our different actions. It makes it a little bit easier to start off with. So let's start with some of the basic foundation for 3D design in Fusion 360. Depending upon what kind of modeling application that you're going to use, it may be something like molding with clay in a computer. It may be something like building with Legos in a computer to create your 3D design. For Fusion, it's going to be something like creating a sketch with some basic geometry and then just pulling that sketch into three-dimensional space. So there are some important construction tools that are part of Fusion 360, and this goes back to some basic grade school geometry. You have your points, which is just a single point in space, no dimensions. Then you've got your line, which goes out in infinite space in either direction. And then you have your planes, just like a piece of paper that you can draw on, and of course your three-dimensional space. So the way that sketches work is you choose a plane and you draw a shape on that, and that's going to be the starting point of your design. You'll be able to then pull into 3D space whatever you are modeling. Um, so, to create different shapes, it all can start very simply, and then it just depends upon how you pull that 2D shape into space to what kind of shape it creates. So if you start with just a circle and you pull that into 3D space, you're going to end up with a cylinder. If you go from a circle to a point that is offset and you combine those two, that's where you end up with a cone, and that's kind of like a loft. You can revolve a shape around a point. So if you have a circle and a point in the middle and you revolve that, that's where you end up with a sphere. If you have a circle and a point offset, you can revolve that and you end up with like a torus or a donut shape. And so all of those are just dealing with a sketch on a two-dimensional plane and then pulling it into space. And that's just going to be a constant theme as we go through the different functions of Fusion 360. So as we are working through this, I'm going to reference the guide again. That is going to be linked in the chat if you guys wanted to access that. If you guys get lost, you can always go back in a step in the guide. If there is something else that I'm covering too quickly, or if you want me to go back and cover a previous step, you can reference the guide to make it easier to know exactly where I need to back up to. So just let me know anywhere along the way if there is anything that I need to pause on or go slower with, or go back in time and cover a previous step. So as we begin, let's just go ahead and go through some basic navigation. So you have your kind of normal menu at the top, that you've got kind of your file menu here, and then you've got save. So let's just save this project from the get-go. It's always a good practice to save early and save often. If you're following along in the guide, you'll notice at the end of each and every page, I have a note to save your progress, because it's just going to make life a lot easier if you save along the way. So for this project, I'm just going to name it Coffee Cup. and click on save. So again, I clicked on the save button and it prompted me to name my project and save it. And that is going to be something that is stored on my Fusion 360 account. So if you sign into a different computer on your Fusion 360 account, that project is still going to be there. And so it makes it really nice if you use a couple different computers. So let's go ahead and go to our browser menu here, and let me pull over a little magnification, make it a little bit easier to see kind of what I am gesturing at. So this little box is going to show just where my cursor is at on screen and blow it up a little bit so it's easier to read. So here we have the browser at the top left-hand side of the screen, and this allows us to look at different aspects of the project. You can see the project name right up here, coffee cup. And so let's go ahead and click on document settings. And so that's going to show us some additional information about our project. And we can see here that the units right now are set to millimeters, and that's something that you can change. So I don't know about you guys, but my brain doesn't necessarily work in millimeters. I tend to think in inches. So I will go ahead and change my units to inches. So even though I clicked on the left hand screen, that drop down shows up on the right hand side. And so you can choose whichever units make the most sense in your brain, but I'm going to choose inches just to make it a little bit easier for me to visualize as I'm going along. So just to get a sense of the space and how navigation works, we're going to create a box on our screen. The box is not going to be part of the final design, but it makes it a little bit easier to see how your screen is moving around when there is an object in it. So to do that, we're going to make sure that the solid menu is selected at the top left of the screen and that is underlined. And in that menu, there's a drop down called Create. So let's go ahead and click on that. And then if we keep scrolling down, there is an option in that menu right about the middle that says Box, and we'll just click on that. Now we've got a new thing kind of showing up on screen. So we have our three planes for our different axes, for our ZY axis, for our ZX axis, and for our YX axis, excuse me. And so each of these yellow faces is a plane that we can choose to start drawing on. So I'm going to click on the one that is on the bottom here between the green and the red, the Y and the Z axes. And now I'm going to click to create one corner of my box. This can be however large or small that you want. So I'm going to click to place one corner. And now that I've clicked once, you can see that there's different dimensions that are showing up on screen. So if you want to have your box be a particular dimension, you can actually type dimensions in. You can hit tab to move on to the next box and to type something else in, and it's going to lock it into place. Otherwise, if you wanted to hit escape, it's going to let you choose where you want to place that next point. And this is going to decide how big we want the bottom of our box to be. So once I click again, now we have the bottom of the box, and it's going to ask us how much we want the height to be. And here we can just click on the arrow and drag it up. Otherwise, we could type a height in. And you can click on those different arrows and kind of manipulate to decide how big, how small you want your box to be. Once you're happy with the size of your box, in the menu to the right, once again, you have different dimensions. You can type dimensions in here, but I'm happy with the size there, so I am just going to click on OK. And so now we have created a 3D object in space. It looks a little 2D right now, just the way that it's appearing on screen, not moving, not doing anything. Kind of looks like a cube that you would sketch in a notebook. So to move it around and really to be able to see all the different sides of the object that we're working with, we will go to the top right hand corner here, and this is called the view cube. So I can click on any side of this cube and it's going to move my screen to that position, or I can click and move this cube around. So if I click on front, it automatically moves the sketch that I made, the 3D shape that I made, so that way we can see the front of it here. But I can also click on it and hold that click and rotate it around, and it's just going to pivot, and so we can see all different sides of the box. Now if I get this really turned around, whoa, there it's hanging upside down. That's not a really comfortable way to see it. An easy way to get back to center is to go back to your view cube, and you can see that there is a house button, a little house button at the top left hand side of the view cube, and that is our home. So if you click on that, it's automatically going to recenter the object for you and make it a little bit easier to see. You can also use some of the tools at the bottom of the screen, not just the view cube here, but you can use some of the tools down here to change how you are looking at your cube also. So we have orbit. So if I click on that button, now I can click and orbit around, just kind of like I was dragging the view cube, but now I'm clicking anywhere on screen and moving my mouse around in order to make that orbit happen. And so as long as my cursor looks like this odd little orbit shape, it's going to keep doing that. If I want to change back to normal, I can just tap the escape key on my keyboard and I'm back to a normal cursor. And again, if I want to reset my view, I can hit the home button and it comes back to center to make it really easy. If I wanted to look at a particular face and I didn't want to click on the view cube, or maybe the face wasn't perpendicular to one or parallel to one of the views on the cube, what I can do is I can click this look at button, click on a face, and it's going to make it so we can see that face clearly in the view. And then going right on down the line, we have pan that you can click on, and that's just going to move the shape up, down, left, right without changing perspective there. We've got our zoom button that you can use to drag in and out, just up and down to zoom in and out. You can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse to do the same thing if you have a scroll wheel. And now I am done with playing with the zoom in, zoom out. You can see that it's got those funny little arrows for my cursor, and that's not what I want. I want to go back to normal. So if I hit the escape key, it brings my cursor back to normal, and I can hit that home button so that way I have my cube reset. Now, if I am going to go back here, so kind of in the same menu where we change the document settings to move the units to inches, we also have other things in this menu. And so we have the bodies menu, and so any of the 3D objects that we create, those are going to show up as bodies. So I can actually click and highlight this whole cube. This is the body that we just created, and that's going to select everything. And you can click on different sketches, different parts of your drawing in the menu off to the left here, and it just makes it really easy to select everything. Now this cube we only really made for the purposes of learning how to interact with the different ways that you can see 3D objects in Fusion, so we don't really need that to make our coffee cup. So the next step is going to be actually clicking on this menu to the left here, making sure that we have body 1 selected, and your cube should show up as blue. then you want to right click on that and you're going to get a new menu that pops up. And so if you just move down your menu to delete, we're going to delete that box because that's not something that we're going to need for our final design. And so we will go ahead and move on to creating our coffee cup then step by step. So the coffee cup isn't going to look exactly like this. We're going to do a couple of fun little things. This is just a regular ceramic coffee cup to use as a prop. But for the very first step of creating our coffee cup, we're actually going to draw what the bottom of the cup is going to look like. And so that's going to be a two-dimensional sketch, and we're going to pull that into 3D space. So to get started creating the bottom of the cup, we first want to create a sketch. So I'm going to go to the top of my screen here, and I've got the solid menu, and I can do one of two things. I can either click on this create sketch button, or I can click on the create drop down, and there we still have another version of the create sketch button. And I'll click on that, and then it's going to give us an option to get started. Now we have our different faces of the drawing. We've got the front, the side, and the bottom here, and this is just giving us options. Where do you actually want to start your drawing? And since we're going to be creating the bottom of the coffee cup, I'm going to select that bottom plane right there. And it doesn't really matter which one you select. If the coffee cup is this way, or this way, it's still a coffee cup. It just makes it a little bit easier to start at the bottom here. So I will click on that, and you can see that it moves our view so that way we're looking at the grid just in a flat way. It's going to be kind of like drawing on a piece of paper here. So the next step is going to be to draw what the bottom of the cup is going to look like. Now we're going to make this coffee cup a little bit funky, and we're going to give it a square bottom. So if you notice, now that we have our plane selected, this menu changed. Instead of being in the solid menu here, we are now in the sketch menu because we are drawing in 2 dimensions. And so to sketch, to create the square that we're going to start from, I can either click this icon to create a 2-point rectangle. Otherwise, I can click on the drop down and it'll give me a couple of different options for rectangle. And we'll just start with the 2-point rectangle here because that one's going to be easiest. So I just clicked that. You can see that my cursor changed a little bit. And so I'm going to click here. You can see the 1 and the -1 here. So that is 1 inch. So I will place the first corner there. And then I will place the next corner here. And then you can kind of see the size of the box that I created. Now, because my cursor still has that funky thing on there, if I click again, oops, it's going to start making a new box and another box every time I click. So if you don't want to do that, you can hit the escape button and it's going to bring your cursor back to normal. And you can actually highlight any extra boxes, any extra pieces of your drawing, and then tap the delete key on your keyboard. Oh, and it will start to remove those. So anything extra, you can just go back and remove those. All right, so now that we have our box, and I'm pretty happy with that, we will just go ahead and click on the green button to finish sketch. There we go. So we have a nice little box right there. So the next step we're going to do is we're actually going to work on creating the top lip of our coffee mug, that ring right there. And so to create that ring, we need to have a surface to draw on to add that to what we want to build. And so we're going to actually construct another plane. So we have our plane on the bottom that we drew our square on. We're going to make another one, and it's going to tell us how tall I want the coffee cup to be. So if I go to this construct drop down, again, we're back in the solid menu because we completed the sketch. And if you go over to the right a little bit more, you've got your construct options. You can either click this button here, this icon right here, or go into the drop down menu to create an offset plane. And so we're going to select the plane that we just drew on. So go ahead and click on that square, and that's going to select that bottom plane. And I'm going to drag, I'm basically creating a new plane offset from the one that we just drew on. And however big I drag that arrow up, that is how tall the coffee cup is going to be. And so I have the bottom of our coffee cup that is a 2-inch square that I created. Your guys's bottom might be a little bit different, and that's fine. And you can choose however tall you want it to be. I'm gonna make mine, I think 4.5 inches is pretty good, but you can make a really tall, skinny one. You can make a short, fat one, whatever you prefer. And so once you have that plane offset at the right distance, then go ahead and click on OK. And so now we can also click on that home button, and that's going to bring both objects that we created into view. That's a really nice thing about the home button, is no matter the things that you add to your drawing, it's always going to recenter everything you create and bring it into view the best that it can. So now that we have that plane created hovering above where we drew our base, now we can go ahead and start drawing the rim of the cup. So again, I'm going to go to the solid menu, and you can either click on this create sketch icon, or you can go to the create drop down and click on create sketch. Now, for this one, we want to click on the plane that you just created, so that way we can draw on that plane to make the top lip of the coffee cup. So we'll click on that, and once again, it brings us flat facing that plane so we can draw on it. And you can see the rectangle base, the square base that we just created for the coffee cup, and that's because we're looking at it this way, where you can we're drawing on this surface here, but you can see the bottom through it because all of this is transparent right now. So for the top rim of our coffee cup, now that we're in the sketch menu, that we're working on our sketch, let's go ahead and click to create a center diameter circle. So again, you can click in this menu here, this icon. Otherwise, you can go to the create drop down, go to circle, and choose an option to create your circle. And I find that the center diameter circle is pretty easy here. And so you can click then, your next click is going to be the middle point of your circle, and you can put that wherever. I'm going to make, like I said, my coffee cup's going to be a little bit funky, so I'm actually going to offset it so it's not going to be perfectly centered on my square. So I click, and that is my middle point, and then as I drag my cursor away, you can see that lip for the coffee cup is starting to form. So you can make the lip of your coffee cup smaller than your base, and it's going to look kind of like a little jug, or you can make it bigger than your base, and it's going to taper outward, and that's generally what I prefer. It evokes more of a coffee cup to me. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger than my rectangle there, and so now I have the lip of what my coffee cup is going to look like. And again, if I keep clicking, it's gonna keep making circles, and that's no fun. So I can hit the escape key, and it's going to make my cursor back to normal. And I can click on the shapes that I created and tap on the delete key, anything that I don't want, so that way I'm left with only the shape that I want to have remaining. Now that I'm done with the lip, I'm going to click to finish sketch, and there we have it. Now we have what is going to be the square bottom of our coffee cup, and then the round lip of the coffee cup. So these are just two drawings right now that are hovering in space. This is going to be the fun part, where we are actually going to go in and connect those two into a three-dimensional shape. So we're going to go to the solid menu here, and under the create drop-down menu, I'm going to click on loft. So again, you want to make sure that you've already clicked the green button to finish your sketch. You want to be in the solid menu here, go to the create drop-down and click on loft. And so with the loft menu, it's going to have you select different shapes to connect. So we're going to click on the square bottom. That's going to be our first one. And then we are going to click on the lip of our cup right there, and automatically it connects those two funky shapes to create something that is new. And so that is an interesting way that you can create 3D objects, a little bit more interesting than a cylinder in my opinion, but there's multiple ways that you can create different shapes in Fusion. If I wanted this to be a cylinder, for example, I could just draw one circle and I could pull that into space, or I could draw two circles offset, kind of like what we did here, and connect them with the loft tool. A bunch of different ways to do it. And so if you wanted to go back here, you can click on the two different shapes and you can X those out if you accidentally selected extra things. But you can go back and you can click on your bottom and your top and get those two connected. And so now we're just going to click on OK, and we have our new shape. And so if you go into the menu off to the left hand side here, you can see the bodies, and now we've got body 2 because we created that cube first. Now this is the new 3D shape that we're working on. And then there's a couple other different menus here. So if you pop these open, you can actually see the sketches that we created, and I can click on the eyeball to show and hide those. So if I click on this one, it shows the square that I created. If I click on that one, that shows the top lip that I created, but I'm just going to hide those to make it a little bit easier to see. And then under construction, I can choose to show the plane that I created to draw the circle on. So if you create a point, a line, different things like that, those will show up in your construction menu, and you can always reference those later, but we don't need those right now. So right now, I'll just kind of orbit a little bit, show this interesting little shape that we've created. I can click home to go right back to center. Right now we've created the body of the coffee cup. We'll get to the handle later, but if you notice, it's solid. It's the little brick that we've got going right there. So we need to hollow it out in order to be able to store whatever we want in this coffee cup, right? And so the next step that we are going to do is just going to modify. So again, we want to make sure that we're in the solid menu. We've got our regular cursor going on. And if we go over to the right here, we've got our modify menu. Now I can either click this icon right here to create a shell, or I can click open that modify drop down, and I can also select shell from that menu there. And from there, I'm going to click on the top surface. This is the rim of the coffee cup, remember that round surface, and that is where I want the opening to be. So I will just click on that. And so now I have an arrow, and a little dimension here for inside thickness. So I can either click and drag that arrow and I can decide how thick I want my coffee cup to be, or I could just type in a dimension in this box right here. And so I'm gonna make that 0.25, 1/4 of an inch. And you can decide too if you want to go on the inside of your shape. If you wanted to go on the outside of the shape, you can flip it and you can do that and make it bigger that way. Usually it's a little bit easier to go on the inside. You can also decide to do both. And I'm just going to go on the inside at 0.25 inches. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm not going to save it yet. I'm just going to go through those steps one more time. And so we're back to where we started here. So I'm going to click on this icon to create a shell. I'm going to click on the very top of our shape because that's where we want the opening to be. And I'll drag the arrow in a little bit to create the thickness of the cup, but I'm going to make mine 1/4 of an inch, so I'll just type that in. And when you're happy with how you have it set up, you can just go to the menu to the right and click on OK. And so now if you click on your view cube and rotate and pivot, you can start to see you have a bottom to your coffee cup now. You've actually got a hollow cup that you can use to store pens or liquid or whatever you want inside of your cup. So there we go. And I will go ahead and click on that home button to return our view to home. So the next step is going to be creating a handle for our cup. But since these sides are curved, it's not a flat surface that we can draw on to start to create that handle. So we need to create a surface to draw on before we can really start to create it. So for this, we're going to construct a new plane. So again, you want to be in the solid menu, go over to construct. Don't click this button this time. We're going for a different one in the drop down. So click your drop down that says construct, and you want to select a plane at an angle. We're going to create a plane at an angle to start drawing what our handle is going to look like. So go ahead and click on that. And so we're going to select an edge that we're going to angle this plane on. So you're going to want to click on one of the bottom edges of your coffee cup here. So I'm just going to click on this one. You can choose to rotate around and select a different one if you want, but I'm just going to click this one that is right here. And so now I have this yellow plane that is starting to form, and then I have this arc with a blue handle on it. So I can click on that blue handle and I can change the angle of my plane. It's always going to stay intersecting with the bottom of my cup, but I can switch the angle. And so the way I want this plane to be is just barely touching the side of the cup. So you can see some parts here that are a little bit brighter yellow, and then some parts here that are a little bit grayed out. That's because this plane is just barely touching and going inside the edge of the cup. And that's good because that means that we can plant the handle right in the edge of the cup. And you can turn your view around a little bit to make it easier to see. I can go on the side here and I'll use my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see that yellow plane going through the side of the cup. And again, if I want to change that, I can click on the blue handle and rotate it, but really the goal is to have it just barely skimming the surface right there. And so that looks pretty good at 85 degrees. It's going to want to naturally move in 5-degree increments, but if those 5-degree increments do not work for you, don't be afraid to type in and just kind of experiment and figure out one that's going to work for how you have your design set up. So then just go ahead and click on OK when you are happy with your plane. And there we have it. So now that we have our plane set up, we are going to draw on it. So again, we're in the solid menu. I can click on this button to create a sketch, or I can go in the drop down and click on the create sketch button. And then I can click on that yellow plane that I just created that's barely skimming the side of my coffee cup. And you can see it's kind of got that edge there. I am facing that plane exactly. And so I want to still keep this view, but I can't see the top of my coffee cup, so that's a little bit weird. So I'm going to click on the pan button at the very bottom of the hand, and I'm just going to scooch that down a little bit so that way I can see my coffee cup a little bit easier. And no, I don't want to keep panning around. My cursor looks like that funny thing, so I'm just going to hit the escape button, and now my cursor's back to being a normal cursor, which is good. So we are basically going to create kind of like a half a donut, and that is going to be what makes our handle. And to create that, I'm going to draw a shape, a little oval that's going to match the very top of what my handle is. And then that little oval profile, I'm going to create a line that goes right in the middle of my handle, and I'll rotate this circle around the line to make that half donut, and that's what our handle is going to be made out of. And so the first step, we're going to create a shape that's going to match kind of like a cut. If you were to cut this, like what that would look like in profile for our handle. So we're in the sketch menu because we are sketching right now, and we want to go to create and click on that drop down menu, and we are going to go with an ellipse because it's not quite a circle. It's kind of like a flat squished oval that makes the handle of the coffee cup. So we're going to click on ellipse there. And so I'm going to create the center point of my ellipse for the top part of the handle. And I'm just going to go right about here, and that's about the center of my coffee cup. And so that first click, I put the center of my ellipse. And then the next click, I'm going to decide how wide I want my handle to be this way. And so I want it to be a little bit wider than it's going to be tall. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball and see what I think looks cool. And I'm going to go with the 0.8 inches there. And now for my last click, I can decide how tall I want that to be. And so I can click and I can create that really big and skinny. That's a little weird though. And so I'm going to make it a little bit flatter, kind of like the strip of clay that was used to make the handle of this particular coffee mug. And so I'll just click again there. And now again, if I keep clicking, it's going to keep wanting to draw ellipses, and that's not good. That's not what we want. So if my cursor still has this funny thing on it, I can hit escape, and now it's back to a normal arrow, and I can click on the shapes that I don't want, and I can hit on delete to remove those. Now don't finish your sketch just yet. This is just one part to create our donut. We need to tell it what line we're going to spin it around to create the handle then. And so I'm going to go back to my sketch menu, and we've got the line icon here. Again, you can go into your drop down and click to create a line. And so I'm going to make a line that is at the very center of the handle. So if this attachment point right here at the very top of the coffee cup is that ellipse that I just made, I'm going to draw a line right in the middle of my handle, so that way I can spin my ellipse around that line in order to make my handle in this program. So my coffee cup is a little bit skewed, I'll create my handle a little bit skewed too to go with it. You can create yours perfectly level. It's going to want to snap to it. That's fine. I'm going to make mine just a little bit more fun, a little wonky right there. And it's going to want to keep drawing lines. I'm going to hit the escape button and then no more lines. I'm back to my normal cursor. You'll notice that this line goes past the edges of the coffee cup, and that's perfectly fine. We're just using this as a reference. It's not going to show up in the final design. Now, any of these, if you wanted to mess with it, to change it right now while we're here, you can click and drag and move things around a little bit while you are in this screen. You can move your points up and down and just make any little adjustments that you want to. But I think I'm pretty happy with my line and my ellipse here, so I'm going to click on the green button to finish this sketch. And so now we can see it right here as it moves back to our home position. So move that back home. There we go. So now that we have the attachment point for the handle and we've got the line for where we're going to revolve it around, the next shape we're going to do is indeed called a revolve. So because I clicked the finish sketch button, the green finish sketch button, I am back in my solids menu and I'm going to create a revolve. So you can click that icon there, or you can select it from the drop down menu. And then it gives you different options over to the right here. And so the profile is going to be the shape that you want to match. And so I'm going to click to make sure that that next to profile is blue. I want to select the profile first. And I'm going to click on that ellipse right there and highlight that because that's the thing that I want to rotate around. But it needs to know what axis to use. And so now I'm going to click the select button next to axis and I will click on the line that I created, and look at that, it's starting to do something there. It's creating kind of a donut, but if I spin that around, it's cutting a hole into my cup, and that's still not what I want. So it gives you different operations at the side here for what you're doing. And right now we're on a cut operation. We don't want to use this shape to cut. We want to join. We want to make a handle that joins with what we've already done. So that's looking a little bit better already. If I go back to my view cube and I tilt up, it's poking through the middle of the mug. Now that's gonna work, but I won't be able to put as much coffee in there, so that's not good. So for that, we can actually use this handle right here. So I've got this little arc and this blue handle. So now I can click this and start dragging, and then you can see where I drag it to, that handle is going to start to come out of that ellipse right there. So I'm just going to click and drag and make sure that that connects at the bottom here. And oh, you can see this is why at this step you're going to want to use your view cube a lot and change your perspective, because it looked like from the home perspective that looks like that connects, that looks like a full handle. But if I drag the view cube and take a closer look at a different angle, and I'm zooming in here using my scroll wheel, I can see that it is not connecting, and that's not good. So I'm just going to click on that handle there and scooch it in a little bit more, and I'll just do it a little bit more even here. So now I can go up. You can see it's poking into the cup. That's not what we want. Again, we can use that blue handle, and we can type in degrees if we want to. I'll just get that pretty close there. You can also change the direction. Right now we're going one side of our axis here, but you can choose if you wanted to do two sides. So I can actually drag it a little bit in from the top here. So if you're finding that it's connecting at the bottom but not at the top, or the other way around, you might try two sides, and that's going to give you two handles that you can play with, so that way you can make it so your your handle is going to connect all the way around. Now, I am actually going to leave a little nubbin on the inside. If you can hide that, that's best. But some people, their sketches, it doesn't want to hide, and so I'll show folks how to get rid of that if they have a little piece of their half donut still peeking in there. So I'm just gonna leave that. But if, like I said, if you can avoid that, that's for the best. But if you have that problem, this is going to be so that way I can show you how to fix it. So I think that looks pretty good. It's going to join and create that. So that is perfect. I'm going to click on OK. And there we have the handle for our coffee mug. And like I said, sometimes you can't get it quite perfect, so you have a little thing sticking in on the inside. So what you can do is you can just angle up so that way you can see that a little bit better, and go ahead and highlight that so that way it's blue, and just hit on delete, and it'll give you the option to help remove that little piece there. So I just hit Control Z to undo that if that didn't work out quite right for you. So like the first time I tried clicking on this and deleting that, and it made a whole donut. That's not what I want. So I'm going to hold Control and hit Z to undo. So that brings that back, and I'll go ahead and click on that little ring around it and delete, see if that works. There we go. Now it's gone. Now we got a really clean inside. We can spin it around, and we have a coffee cup shape. Good job, guys. All right. So now I'm going to show you a couple little finishing touches that you can do to really make this look cool. You could leave it right here. It's a functional coffee cup, but there's a couple little things that you can do in Fusion that's really going to make your designs look tidy and make people wonder exactly how you got something so curvy and pretty. So we are actually going to use the fillet tool to round over the edges. So for this, I'm just going to click on fillet, or I can go into my modify menu. This is the same menu we kind of used to create the shell, but this time I'm going to click to create a fillet. And move those boxes out of the way. So I've got my fillet box to the right here, and so it's going to want you to add different pieces to the box. So I can click on these lines here on the inside of my cup, and I can put in a dimension. So since I made my cup 1/4 of an inch thick, I'm going to just do a 0.12 to round that over. And you see that pretty little thing that we created, that nice rounded edge on the coffee cup? That's pretty cool. So I'm just going to deselect that, and I can actually click on this ring here. So you don't have to click on edges, you can actually click on the ring and do that. You can drag your arrow in and out to choose how big you want the round over to be, but that's not quite good enough yet either. I'm actually going to go over to the left here to the bodies menu, see if I can select body here. Nope, doesn't want to do it. That's okay. I'm just going to click and drag a big rectangle around my whole coffee cup. There we go. Now we got the whole thing selected. Let's make this really fancy. So I'll type in 0.12, and there we go. Look at all of those pretty rounded edges, even around our handle. That would be a little bit trickier if we were trying to do that in a different program, but Fusion just automatically calculates that and figures that out. Now sometimes it's going to give you an error. Let's say if I change this to oh goodness, 0.2 or something like that. It's not gonna want to do that. You see, it's not doing a round over when that's big. That's because these edges, if it starts hitting up against each other and causing some interference in that coffee cup, you might see some errors come up, or you might see where it's not doing anything. So I'm going to change this back to 0.12 because I know that that's going to work. You can fiddle around with that, move it up and down until it's where you like it. If it's still not working, no matter what number you put in here, maybe if you don't select everything, but just select a few edges and try for those. Sometimes where the handle meets the cup, it doesn't want to do it for whatever reason. Sometimes the math is too complicated or there's some interference that we're not seeing, but that's okay. You can just select whatever edges, faces, or the whole thing and round that over to where you like it. And so you can go ahead and click on OK. And now we have our coffee cup. Now I haven't been saving. You need to click that save button and make sure that you save early, save often. And so there we have it. So now you can turn your view cube around. You see all of these pretty rounded edges. You did that. Good job, guys. Okay. Now, if you got stuck along the way, if you don't like where exactly the handle is, if you wanted to change something, there's a special feature in Fusion. Let me change my window a little bit so that way my face isn't covering it here. But there is a timeline down at the bottom of the page here. So we can see the last step that we did, that was fillet. We can see where I deleted the little doodad that was sticking out inside my cup where I created the handle. You hover it over it and it's going to show you on the screen exactly what was created during that step. And you can actually click on stuff and choose to edit it. So let's say this handle, if I wanted to make it so that way it was a little bit thicker than what it is in my drawing here. So I have this sketch highlighted that I used to create that. I can right click and now I can go back to edit sketch. And so it brings me back to this step. So if I wanted to make the handle a little bit taller, I can do that. So I'll change that right now here. I think that looks pretty good, a little bit fatter than before. And I can check the box to finish sketch. And it goes back and it does all of the steps that happen afterwards too. So I've got a thicker handle now and it is all rounded over. It deleted the little doodad that was sticking out in the middle. Sometimes it'll create errors and you can just go back and fix along the way. If you wanted to go back in time entirely, you've got this little notch here that you can drag to the left and you can go back one step at a time, or you could go back 5 steps. You can take it however you want to go, however far. And so if you need to make little changes, that's helpful, especially if you're doing like a prototype or something. If there was one hole in your design that was too big or too small for a connection point, you can just go back to your drawing, go to that step where you made that thing, and just make a change without having to redo all of your other work. So that makes it really, really spiffy for Fusion right there. So pan that around and we are good to go there. Make sure that my coffee cup is saved. I just click on the save button. Now let's say that I wanted to 3D print the coffee cup. I actually want to use it to hold pens. Now, for most 3D printers, it's not a good idea to print something that you're going to use with food because food can get stuck inside the little layers of the print, and that's not very healthy. Mold and ugly stuff can grow there. But if I wanted to 3D print this so that way I could have a place to store my pens, let's make this into a file that we can actually use then with the 3D printer. Now, most 3D printers are going to use a file type called STL. So if we go over to the menu here off to the left, and you can see we've got our body 2, that's our coffee cup, and you click on that and it turns blue so you know you've got the right thing. You can right click on that and click Save as STL. And it's going to give you a bunch of different options here. Now, I never really fuss with these. It doesn't, you can change it if you want to, but it really doesn't matter. It does a good product as is. So I'm going to click on OK, and then it gives me a menu where I can choose where I want to save it, and it can choose how I want to name it. So on the desktop, I'm going to save Pandas Coffee Cup and just click on save. Now if I minimize, here it is. I have Panda's coffee cup right here. And I'm using Windows, so I can pull up 3D viewer. So if I wanted to see that in a different application, there we go. There's the coffee cup that we just made. And this would be ready to 3D print on all kinds of different machines if you wanted to go with that. And then another way that you could do it too is you can also export it. So if it wasn't an STL that you wanted, if it was a different file type, say you wanted to bring it into SketchUp or some other program, you can actually choose a different file type to export it. Now when I click to export it, it's going to take a little bit more time, and it even pops up here that this file type requires translation, which could take a couple of minutes. I'll just go ahead and click on export to show. And so what this is actually doing is it's taking our design and it's putting up to the cloud for Fusion 360, and then it's starting to calculate what that looks like in the new file type to create it. And so I could either keep that going, or I'm just going to go ahead and close because we don't need that. But you can see the bar very slowly filling in as it becomes a coffee cup that can be used for SketchUp. Just close that. All right. And that's pretty much all there is to it. If you guys want, you can download the guide that we have linked. This is something that is all for public domain. If you wanted to use it for another class, if you wanted to show somebody else, if you wanted to change a bunch of stuff in it and share it, you can do whatever you want with this guide. It's yours to have and share and use if you wanted to follow this tutorial again, or if you wanted to reference it just to use for other types of modeling, you are more than welcome to. But if you guys have any questions, shoot. I guess I'll hang out here for about maybe another 5 or 10 minutes here answering questions. Just let me know. While I'm waiting, I think I'm going to tweak this design a little bit more. This is a bonus step. It's not listed in the guide, but it's something that's a little bit interesting that you can do too. So the handle to the mug we created as a half a donut. But you notice that this mug has a really fancy little shape, almost like a funny D, that is a little bit easier to grip than just the half donut that we modeled. So I can actually go back and I can change that if I wanted to model something like this. So let me go back in time and go back to my sketch, and I am going to actually edit that. So I have the profile of my handle here, and I'm going to change it because I want to create kind of this shape but on this mug. So what I'm going to do, instead of having this be the axis that I am revolving around to create a D shape, this is going to be the axis for a new offset plane, or a new plane at an angle rather. So I'm gonna go and hit and line that line up with the very center of my ellipse there to make it easy. I'm gonna kind of go at an angle here to sort of match the angle of my funny looking coffee cup. And I'm going to finish my sketch right there. And I'll right click. I'm going to delete all of the features I added after the history marker because I'm going to do something a little bit different. And now when I click away, I can't see my sketch, which is a little bit annoying. So I'm going to go back into the sketches menu, click the eyeball. So now I can see that sketch as I'm moving around. So I'm going to create a new plane at an angle. So plane at an angle. This time I'm going to use the line that I just drew down the center of my ellipse there. Rotate around so I can see a little bit better. And I'm going to use the blue handle then to grab the plane and rotate it because I want it going kind of straight through the cup. So I'm basically cutting the cup this way so that way I have a place where I can draw what I want my handle to look like. And so I think I'm pretty happy with that, and I'll click on OK. So now I'm going to create a new sketch, and I will click on that yellow plane there that I just made. I can see the dot for the middle of my ellipse, and I'm going to draw kind of this sort of shape to make that for my coffee cup. So I'm going to start with a line, and I'm going to click on that center point here, and I'll click out just a little ways. That looks good to me. Tap on escape so that way I don't have that there anymore. So make that a little bit longer. I want it going through my plane there. And now I can create a spline, which is kind of like a funky arc type thing. Up. Click on spline again. I'll click on the end of my line, create a midpoint here, and then create a bottom point there. Hit, goodness, if I can do it. There we go, and click on that check mark there. Now I have my spline. And I can hit escape so I don't keep drawing more. Use my hand to pan and move around a little bit. And I can change the angle of my spline if I want to make that a little bit shallower. That looks pretty good. Now I'll finish the sketch. And so to create this funky shape here, what we're going to do is we will actually create a sweep instead of a revolve. So with that, again, we're going to select the profile, the ellipse, and the path that we want to follow, and we'll create that line there. And it's wanting to make a cut, so I will scroll down here and make it into a join. And you can see that line that I just drew, that circle wants to follow the path of that line. So I selected the ellipse as my profile and the line that I just drew as my path. And I made sure that it was a join operations. Click on OK. I'll hide that sketch. And so now I have a handle that looks a little bit more like this one. Again, we can see that we got a couple little bits poking on the inside of the cup. I'll click on those and just tap on my delete button to remove them, so that way you got a nice smooth inside of the cup. And again, if I really want to make it fancy, I can click on my fillet tool, select the whole cup, and round everything over. Oh, and there was one of those errors that I was talking about. It doesn't want to round it over. We'll round over at 0.1. Nope. So I will deselect that, and I think I'm just going to settle then for having the top lip and then the bottom on the inside. And I'll rotate it around, select the bottom on the outside. And I will round those over. There we go. That looks pretty spiffy. Let me see if I can add some more. Can I click on that one? And that one maybe? You can do a couple different things at once here. And add in 0.1. So 1, 2. Nope. Oh, there we have it. So now it's creating a nice smooth transition for the handle of the cup. Click on OK. And there, we've got a little bit more interesting shape than just a half a torus, half a donut. Right. Oh, I didn't see any more questions coming up in the chat, but there's always the guide. Again, you can download the guide and use it to your heart's content. None of that is copyrighted. It's all for you guys to use. But that's pretty much all there is to it. A pretty simple program to use, pretty straightforward, and pretty nice that it's free. So thank you everybody for joining today.